Hi, everyone. Welcome to our CAB workshop, all about mastering post-meeting follow-up. So a couple of notes on housekeeping. We'll send you the recorded webinar afterwards. It's being recorded. Type in your cues, your questions in the Q&A box, and we're going to answer them along the way and at the end if there's time permitting. So hi, everyone. I'm Tatiana Falcone. I lead marketing here at Ignite. And you're going to hear shortly from my colleague, Rob Jensen. He's going to cover a lot of the content. So you'll be hearing from him in another 30 seconds or a minute or so. Oh, quickly to go over the agenda, we're going to talk about immediate post-meeting follow-up. So what happens right after the CAB meeting. And then we're going to give you a lot of tips on meeting summary, reporting, and action tracking. And then we're going to cover some other key items that you want to implement, after your meeting. So a few points about Ignite. We're the only global firm dedicated solely to CABs. We've completed over 300 advisory board engagements, and we've developed many industry best practices that leading B2B companies implement in their CABs. And we can help you create an advisory board. We can assess and help you optimize your existing boards and give you recommendations for improvements. And you can hire our team of CAB experts to facilitate your CAB meetings. So we want to get some engagement going here and do a quick poll. So let me just launch the poll. So what is the current status of your CAB program? Don't have a program, haven't started, you're trying to launch, your existing program is on hold, your existing program is in progress, or you're expanding your program and looking to add some new boards. We'll just give it another 5 seconds or so. Let me share the results. So it looks like a majority have a program in progress and others are trying to launch. And then some are expanding the program and a couple of folks don't have one, haven't started. So thank you everyone for participating. Wherever you are in the journey, you're going to get a lot of good tips in today's CAB workshop. So just to intro today's topic, well-run CABs create an environment of trust, openness, peer exchange, co-creation, and your CAB members, when they really feel valued and heard, they'll continue to engage in your CAB and also outside of your CAB. But what we're talking about today is everything that happens after the meeting. So it's critical to follow up on CAB feedback and to ongoingly engage the CAB. So if you're treating your CAB as a one-time event and you're not following up on the feedback, then you're going to risk losing that trust and the openness and momentum you've created from your CAB meetings. So that's what we're talking about today, why the follow-up and everything that happens after the meeting is so critical. So I'm going to hand it over to my colleague, Rob. Start talking about what happens right after meeting. Sure.
Thanks, Tatiana. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay.
Let me just
Okay,
turn off my video really quick.
Okay, sure. All right. Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Tatiana. Thanks. Welcome, everyone. My name is Rob Jensen. I'm a consultant with Ignite Advisory Group. Been here for about 8 years and lots of different clients. I've helped manage and start their customer advisory boards. And I spent my career in high-tech marketing where I did that and other things as well. So happy to talk about the immediate, things that happen right after the customer advisory board, right? Sometimes people think, oh, the meeting's done. We're all done. Well, in reality, sometimes that's when the work really just gets going and things can, you're just getting started. Right. Okay, I'm trying to hit next here, and there we go. Okay, so so the meeting's over, right? And now your people are going home. It's good to have an immediate post-meeting internal debrief, right? So the customers have gone home, you maybe had a lunch or, the meeting ended. While all your team is there and while the information is fresh, it's good to meet with the host company people, right? Talk about, did we meet the meeting objectives? But, start with, hey, what worked? What didn't you like? Again, with the internal team, you can also review the survey feedback. We'll talk about that in a bit as well. You can also, kind of go session by session. That was great. This you can review, kind of some things that were discussed or maybe some surprises and anything. But again, good to have an internal debrief right after with the host company team. Okay. Then you can review kind of the what's kind of next, so people know all the team knows what's going to be coming next, and maybe some topics came up. Oh, we need to cover this next time. Yeah, okay. You can make sure that's captured, right? You'll want to send an email to all the CAB members that were there, right? If it's in person, you can do it, at the end of the day or whatever, but basically thank them for coming. It's great to come from your executive sponsor. You can let them know that, hey, we're working on the meeting report that'll be coming following afterwards, but it's good to send an email afterwards. Sometimes the members might have requested the presentation. Hey, can we get that? Or a report that you covered. You can send that right after as well if it's ready, but it's good to send an immediate follow-up email. We'll talk about the Chatham House rules. Was basically the meeting report will have a lot of the discussion topics. It's less important with who exactly said them. Talk about that when we talk about the meeting report in a bit. The other thing you can do, let's say the meeting was, if it was in person, you'll do a CAB member feedback survey, right? So the meeting's about to end. If you're there in person, we recommend a printed old school paper survey, right? And the reason is, if you send an electronic one, we'll follow up with an email later, or a Survey Monkey or something. People tend to just get busy. They're flying back. They come back to their office with a bunch of things, right? A bunch of higher priority. They sometimes just won't get to the survey. So what I like to do for in-person is last session before they leave, I have an in-person printed one. I hand it out. We give them, a few minutes, 5 uninterrupted, quiet minutes to fill it out, and we capture all their feedback. If the meeting is virtual, it's also good to send it out as soon as possible, maybe, at the conclusion of your meeting, maybe along with the thank you or a separate one, but while the information is fresh, it's good to get their feedback as quickly as possible. Some sample questions around, how good was, I like to do a survey that has some kind of, quantifiable numbers so I can compare survey results from other meetings, right? From, 1 to 10, and there's scores and everything. So you can see some of the ideas here around, agenda topics, interacting with people, what'd you learn, the overall meeting logistics, city overall, and then some more subjective ones, or objective ones, I should say. What did you like? What sessions were best? What are your key takeaways? What would you like to change for the next meeting? Any recommended topics, right? So, because sometimes those come up in the meeting, and sometimes people will just say what they'd like to, hey, let's make sure we cover this, right? And then you can also rate the standard of this meeting compared to other forums, right? Typically, well-run customer advisory boards are much better than other engagements that they might participate in. And, would you recommend this CAB? You can also ask, like, would you be willing to be a speaker at the next customer advisory board? Sometimes we have companies that have their customers speak. So you can include that in the survey, right? Again, in person, printed survey afterwards, virtually, electronically, via email. Okay, but then once that's done, the next thing you'll want to do is create the meeting summary and what we call an action tracker. And I'll talk about that a little bit. And again, as a reminder, guys, if you do have a question, do feel free to, type it in or ask you can also chat too as well. Okay, so the first thing you want to do is you're going to want to create a meeting report, right? And what is the meeting report? Well, basically, it's a summary of things that were discussed and brought up and addressed and talked about at the meeting. The sources for the meeting report can be, you might have a note taker. In fact, we recommend someone be assigned to be the note taker, right? It's ideal if it's from the host company, because often that your customers will reference things that are, products or jargon or acronyms or something that an outside person may or may not be familiar with, but assign someone. It's not a transcript of everything. That's not that everything that was said. They're not a court reporter, but just the high level notes, right? You want to take pictures of, the flip charts and boards and, any voting or results of group activities, lots of pictures. And then any, debrief notes from the debrief meeting. Again, the survey, the feedback forms, not only the CAB member surveys at the end of the meeting, but also we recommend that all your host company, all the people that participate from your company, provide their takeaways and their notes from the meeting on what we can call employee key takeaway forms. Basically, they fill these out during the meeting, and then you collect them, and then that keeps all the information about the meeting in one spot, as opposed to people come, they get their laptops, even some of your people might take notes, but what happens is sometimes they kind of take away the notes and then they start doing things. Or it's good to kind of keep, I don't want to say control, but just kind of make sure that sometimes you'll get them and sometimes you won't. And so this is one way to do it. It's not entirely the end of the world if people want to capture their notes electronically and then send them to you. That works often too. Sometimes people will record meetings, right? Like, especially if it's virtual, you can go back and look at that too if there's a question on the notes, right? Sometimes in the past, we've had some companies they'll ask about, hey, if we're in person, should we record the meeting? And we don't recommend it. People can act a little differently when they're being recorded. And sometimes it can be hard to hear. And sometimes it's kind of a pain, right? And we couldn't hear that. Can you speak louder for the recording? It's just kind of can be distracting. So it's just kind of not overall recommended. Again, for the meeting, don't, photos, right? I take photos and include them on all the meeting reports. It often really can help with looking at what was discussed. So that's where the information will come from. But again, inside the meeting report is, table of contents, key insights, and potential actions, right? You put the agenda, an executive summary, maybe a slide or two of kind of the high level, what was uncovered and discussed, include all the attendees, right? And then what's next at the end, right? Again, just what was discussed, what was the feedback, and what potential plans might be. So when I talked about when you have your host company people and they're using key takeaway forms, and what this is, again, is it's a piece of paper, you hand them out. This is for in-person meetings. Your host company people will kind of, jog their notes in it and like, oh, we should do this, or, we ought to do XYZ, right? They might not only have their notes and observations and impressions, but they might have their own recommended actions that they're suggesting, right? Again, this is handed out to your own company, and this is reviewed. The instructions for which are talked about in the prep meeting before the meeting that everyone participates in. I've also worked with companies that kind of do this with people take notes, and that's fine, as long as everything's collected, right? There's kind of different ways to do this. The other piece for this is what we call the action tracker. So
Rob,
you're attending a meeting.
I'm gonna pause you for a second. There is a question. Thoughts on sharing the virtual CAB recording with the CAB? Are we making it too easy for CAB members to miss a meeting? Other reasons why sharing recording isn't a good idea.
As always in life, there's pros and cons for everything, right? If you say, hey, we're going to record the meeting and we'll send it to everybody, like especially if you say that in advance, people might say, oh, I'll just listen to it later, right? And then your customers might not participate, right? So I would say that, if you have good attendance, and you have plenty of people, maybe you can say, oh, and you have a healthy program, you might say, oh, we'll record it, we'll send it if you can't make it. If you're kind of trying to get people to attend and some people don't, and you're kind of are you going to be there? I'm not sure, right? It could be a detriment if you say, well, we're going to record it, and someone will say, oh, okay, I don't have to attend, I'll just listen to it later, right? That's my opinion. I don't know, Tatiana, if what you think about that.
Yeah, generally we wouldn't share the meeting recording with CAB members. I wouldn't recommend it. It's not something that we've done, that our clients have done in the past. So it's generally you're sharing the meeting report, and maybe people ask for slides and you share some of the slides, but I wouldn't really share the recording the whole recording with them.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, so I see we're getting some questions in the chat. Should we take a look at, or maybe their notes, or some people share, some people don't.
Oh
They
yeah,
don't share them.
just a
Yeah, that's good.
quick comment follow up that Michael asked the question and they don't share the recording, but they share the agenda.
Yeah,
Definitely, we would definitely always share the agenda before the meeting.
yeah. A question for, is there a recommended tool for the action tracker that is digital, not a spreadsheet? You know, I just use it. Me and my clients, we typically just use an Excel spreadsheet. It tends to work. I don't know. I try to keep it kind of simple, right? It works well. But for the what is the action tracker? Basically, guys, is you had this meeting, you heard all these great things. Your company is now going to do some things. What actions are you going to take, right? Well, there might be many actions to take. So it's good to capture all of them and put them in a document, which we call the action tracker. Just list them, right? Let's see, the notes here, you know, the executive sponsor, you know, is will kind of beforehand, we're going to say, hey, we're going to capture some actions and we're going to do some things. We're going to take action and, you know, prioritize them. And everyone's on board with, yes, we're going to do, it's not just to listen and, oh, that's interesting. No, we're going to do some things, right? So the action tracker will list, you know, all the potential actions. It's a menu. You don't have to do all of them, right? You're going to prioritize them and review them. And yes, we should do that. That's an important one, right? We should prioritize that, right? And then most importantly, from my experience, is who is going to be leading the completion of that action, right? If you just say, we should do that, right? You know, you sometimes, or you might say, oh, product management needs to do blah, blah, blah. It's best to put a name, right? A person, because sometimes if you don't have a name, the action can get dropped, right? We don't want that, or they might not think about it until the next meeting when we're going to review the status of the action. So put a person, right? And a due date, right? Doesn't have to be, you know, next week. It can take a few months or Q1 or whatever it is, right? A due date, and then track the status. It's recommended once you get this action list is to have a monthly action tracker meeting with everyone who's on this list of the key stakeholders, right? Track how it's going. I do it monthly. My other company does it monthly and it works really well. So, you know, some are going to be, you know, really easy, right? Like, oh, follow up with this guy. He needs a training or he needs a new whatever, right? Some are very easy to do and some might take a long time. Like, oh, build this in the product. Wow, that'd be really hard. You can't really do that. And we're not really sure. You don't have to do all of them. In fact, you might collect so many that you might just want to prioritize the top 10, right? Or 5, or you might decide, well, we should do all of these, right? So that's the process. So looking at the chat here, let's see here. Hi, Janelle, it can be kind of a collaboration. Oh, Tatiana did that. Yeah, it works in the Smart Sheet. Smart Sheet is great too. Okay, good. Okay, good. Yeah, whatever works for your group, right? Excel works just because everyone knows it and you can share it and send it to people, right? It sounds like people like Smart Sheet. That's good. Tips, you know, summarize go forward action into 4 or 5 kind of themes, right? In other words, some might be marketing messaging. Some might be product management, right? Some, you know, because some might be features to your product, right? Kind of group those together and then summarize them in a slide. You know, you might communicate that internally, right? Sometimes if you're, you know, using your meeting report and you're sending it to a bunch of people and you want to show them, hey, you know, you might want to summarize some things, right? We're doing this. Here's the status, right? You can, you know, feel free to put it in a PowerPoint if you're sharing, you know, for example, if you're doing like an executive management meeting, you're presenting on the status of your action items, maybe you summarize, right? The top 5 or whatever. Okay. So again, keep the status going, meet monthly, you know, talk to the owner of it, prioritize it, focus in on the top ones. And then once you get your meeting report, there's several things you can do with it. You want to send it out to your stakeholders internally, but you can send it, you know, to a wide audience internally, right? Think about who would be interested in your customer advisory board survey, right? Well, it should be sales for one, right? They want to know what their customers are saying and what their challenges are. It could be marketing, right? How are our messages resonating? How should we change it, right? In fact, it can be anyone, everyone. Who wouldn't want to learn about what's top of mind for your customers? What are they like? What are their challenges, right? Now, maybe your legal or CFO or whoever does, or finance team or HR, they don't need to see it. But again, feel free to distribute it, right? And then you can also do an external version, right? It can be PDF or you can do PowerPoint. But, we talked about the Chatham House rule. And the point there being is, when you've captured these notes, you put together a report. Let's say a customer says, I'm having a challenge with, usability or whatever it is, your user interface. In the meeting report, you just want to say customers are having challenges with, usability. And the reason is it's not important for who says it necessarily, it's just that it was said, because sometimes there'll be other things too. Our customers will say XYZ, and they may not be as comfortable with saying it if they know that, who said it, right? It's in the meeting report and they said this, right? And they might be embarrassed. Now, your salespeople might say, or your internal people might say, hey, who had a challenge with the usability? In your meeting notes, you can say, oh, this customer, this guy, this woman, whoever did, and that might be good for follow-up. But in the meeting report, it's less important with who said it, but with what they said, right? And then any action items that impact the group, like follow up with this or start, we're going to create this white paper on this topic. That's good to include. But you can have two different versions, right? Okay. Yes, we'll share the deck afterwards then. Okay, any questions? If there's any questions, Tatiana, just jump in. I know we have the Q&A here. Let's see. What's the recommended time frame for sending the meeting report other than as soon as possible? A week or two afterwards, right? You want to create it and you have to get your notes and everything. You want to review it, make sure everyone's happy with it, and then, send it out 2 or 3 weeks after the meeting. I don't think your customers are going to be waiting with bated breath for the meeting report, because those that look at it say, yeah, that's pretty accurate. We talked about that. But it's good that they're seeing like, wow, they've captured they heard us, they're listening, they've captured this and they're doing stuff, right? So it's not a huge rush. You want to do a good job of it, but a couple weeks afterwards. Doesn't have to be, within 48 hours or anything. Okay. So I hope that makes sense. Again, any questions around, the meeting report or the action tracker? Again, the meeting report's best in PowerPoint, right? Again, not only can you send it to people, but the other thing that I recommend is you can present it at if some of you have all hands meetings with your employees, right? Hey, we met with our customers. Here's some of the things they said. Here's what they're struggling with, right? Right, customer support might want to hear that, or other people might want to hear. We have a customer advisory board. Oh, we do, especially new people or whatever, right? And if you have sales kickoffs or any internal things, you can present it or send it out, or if you have an employee newsletter, right? You can write an article about your customer advisory board. We'll talk about promoting your cabin a bit, but again, it's just sharing that you have a customer advisory board. I've been to some events where I'll say, oh, do you guys have a customer advisory board? And these are product marketers, right? And they'll say, yeah, we do. And I'll say, how's it going? They'll say, oh, I don't know. You don't know? Why wouldn't you know? Well, that's run by this team over here and they're doing what they're doing. And I don't really know a lot about it. That's common, right? Like, wow, you have a customer advisory board and you don't know how it's going, right? Promote it. We'll talk about that in a bit. All right. So you send out the meeting report, and there's a question here for Barbara. Let's see. Do you note any comments attributed to customers asking for public sharing? Again, the point of the Chatham House rules is really just to focus on what was said and less on who said it. Now, sometimes there might be a reason this person said it, and that might make sense. Or, hey, this person suggested we all do this, or so. Use your own judgment. And you have the notes, right? So the note taker is saying this person or this customer has this. So if someone said, wow, you send the meeting report, it doesn't have who said it. And a salesperson says, wow, who said that? You can send them the notes and say, okay, here's the notes, here's who said what and everything, but you can see that this customer said that and here's their particular challenge, right? Okay, year-round customer engagement. So, you have the meeting, you send a thank you survey, send a meeting report, and we talk about ongoing engagement. Tatiana, is this you or me now?
Oh yeah, I'll do it. I'll cover it.
Okay, I'm going to get back remote control. Give up remote
Okay,
control.
cool.
Okay.
So here are some ideas for you. So looking at the top left box. So what were the hot topics So in advance of the meeting, we always interview. Oh, I hear an echo. Do you hear an echo, Rob?
No, it sounds good.
Okay, good. So pre-meeting, you have somehow surveyed your customers. We do 30-minute interviews with them. So you know what the hot topics are, and those are the topics that went into the agenda. So you're at the actual meeting and you're just noticing the trends. What are your CAB members most passionate about? What are they most engaged about? Are there any topics that you just ran out of time and they wanted more time? That's a good indicator that it's a hot topic for next time. So middle box top, build an annual engagement plan and get buy-in. So on the next slide, we're going to show you a quarterly engagement plan. So before your meeting, plan out quarterly touch points and get, approval from your internal executives so that you can present that to your CAB members. And also you want to get that on the calendars internally, get it in for the whole year. So top right, identify the subject matter experts who will lead the post-meeting efforts. So for each, generally the session leaders, so for the different sessions on your agenda, those tend to be subject matter experts. So those are the people that you are going to work with to follow up on different action items. Also, if you have any working groups or subcommittees, identify in advance who could be the subject matter expert there. Also, like on your product team, who are the people that you will need to follow up on different action items? Identify those people. The bottom left box, at your CAB meeting, you can include some time at the end of the meeting, like Rob talked about the survey, the feedback survey. You want to get that from your customers at the meeting, but also you can just set aside some time, maybe 20 minutes, maybe it's 25 minutes, and you ask them at the meeting, what did you like best? And you can go around so everybody hears out loud, and then you ask them also, what other topics would you like to discuss, future topics? So you get that out loud at the CAB meeting. The middle box on the bottom, so you can create working groups, which I'm about to talk about in a minute here. But you can, at the CAB meeting, you can ask the CAB members, you present the topics of the working groups that are going to happen outside of the CAB meeting and ask them to self-select. And it's totally optional. So you have a subset of your CAB members working on a specific deliverable. And then bottom right box, follow the structure moving forward. That seems a little obvious, but you want to keep your eye on that annual engagement plan and make any updates as necessary if you need to, move a call or you have an ad hoc kind of industry challenge or disruptor or something new, you can add that in as well. So you want to keep your eye on that engagement plan throughout the year, not just, at the end of the CAB meeting. So here's an example engagement plan spanning 1 year. So it's like one annual meeting. So the next annual meeting is in October, and then it's the following October. And then here are some ideas for you to include the quarterly touch points. So on the bottom, you see that there's a quarterly meeting after that in-person meeting, and you kind of summarize the meeting and you present, you say, hey, we heard your feedback and here's the feedback we're going to action on. And then you have some other quarterly meetings on the bottom there. So one idea, you could have a strategy session with one of the subject matter experts, or you could bring on different executives who have a challenge they want to discuss with the CAB. You could also give updates on your company, or you have a new product release. So you're going to focus about the new product release in another quarterly meeting. And then you can also prepare for the next annual in-person meeting by we interview the CAB members. We do 30-minute interviews to find out what topics are they most interested in. And obviously this has been vetted internally as well. And we have another, I'll send you another webinar where we go into depth about these interviews. So in the middle there at the top, you see working group meetings. So that could be another way that you engage the board. So here, it's very common that companies want to deep dive in looking at product enhancements. They want further feedback. So maybe those working group meetings are leading up to that new product release. And here I'm about to talk about next is working groups.
Tatiana.
Yeah.
Yeah, before we move on, just one note about the timeline is it's really good to communicate that, especially, at the end of the meeting when you say, here's what's next, because that way customers will understand what's next. And when you invite them to the next meeting, let's say, or it's a quarterly conference call or whatever you're doing, you'll get better attendance. I've dealt with some clients where they didn't really have this, and then when they're trying to have a meeting or a call, they're getting mixed results and getting participants because I think their customers just are not clear on what the participation schedule is. There's other dynamics involved, but when you start your program, you have kind of a timeline, and just make sure everyone is aware of the timeline, because it kind of communicates expectations for participation, right? And everyone on this call, it's a fine line. You want to update your customers, you want to keep them involved. You don't want to push too much. You don't want to overburden, right? Maybe you do meet quarterly, maybe you meet twice a year, whatever it is. But when you do meet, you have a reason, right? Just not meeting just because we said we were going to, right? Just make sure you do have a meeting, right? And if you just met and you don't have necessarily an update for your next quarterly one, or you didn't have enough time to advance what you have, canceling it's not the end of the world, right? But when you meet, have a reason and just communicate that timeline, you'll get better attendance.
Yeah, that's totally a great point, Rob. Definitely. I totally agree with everything you just said. So we're talking about the working groups. Sometimes we call them subcommittees. So it's kind of like a mini CAB within a CAB. So just like your CAB, you need to have a structure, and you need to fully prepare and plan for each meeting, and you have to have internal alignment on what you're discussing, what are the key questions. Just like a CAB, this isn't an opportunity to pitch your products, so keep it advisory. And you have to create, just like your CAB, you want to create a one-pager charter. It lays out the duration of the working group, who is the chair, and who are the members, and what are the specific deliverables. So just some tips, how do you come up with the topics? So obviously you want to brainstorm prior. You have the hot topics on your actual agenda. You want to think about which topics lend themselves well to a working group. And then you're at the meeting, you're validating based on the discussions. And at the end of the meeting, so during the lunch breaks or the breaks, you've had an idea about a couple of working groups you might want to implement. And you can actually align on that with your executive sponsor, let's say on the lunch break. So at the end of the meeting, this is what it looks like. You can present, you put up a slide, or maybe it's a flip chart, and you can present 1 to 2 working groups, and you can ask right there in the meeting, you can ask people to self-select. And it's good to have, if your CAB has, 12 to 15, 18 people, this isn't a requirement, but you want to have a minimum of it's not a requirement for CAB members to join, but you want to, several of them have expressed interest. You want to get a minimum of 5 or 6 people or so signed up for that working group. So key here is that you're focused on specific deliverable. So you're delivering something specific that you're clearly articulating in that charter. And then you can provide updates at the quarterly meetings, and it could also be some of the CAB members providing the update. So here is, we always say that we don't want CAB members to nominate anyone else in their place for CAB meetings. So here is where you can expand the reach of the CAB. So if the working group is, a specific topic, maybe it's very technical, the CAB member can nominate somebody else on their team to join the working group. So in this way, you're expanding the reach of your CAB, and you have to specify that in the charter if you're going to do that. So these are some You want to say something, Rob?
Oh, no, I'm sorry, Tatiana. I was just going to say we have a question that we can go ahead and address. What do you think about creating a CAB page on our company website and share bios and participants? I think it's a great idea. I've done this with some companies. Have a page, your customer advisory board. Include charter pictures of meetings and include the participants in their bios. To get around any objections or putting company customer logos or anything. When you recruit people, say, hey, when you join this CAB, we're going to do this and blah blah blah, and you agree to have your bio posted on our website, and then you just do it. And yeah, that's a great idea. I like it. And then your other customers will say, wow, that's great, I'd like to do that, I'd like to join that, how do I join that, right? And then it helps you build and recruit. Talk a little bit about that later. Get a pipeline. So I think it's great.
Definitely. Yes, I agree with what you just said, Rob. So coming back to the working groups, these are some approaches just to give you some ideas. So on the left, we have example deliverables. So it could be a benchmark, and then, techniques in the middle. Maybe you're asking the CAB members to gather internal data from their internal teams, and then you're going to anonymize the data and present it back to them. It could be typical is like top 10 best practices, and you're going to get, the CAB members are going to share their insights and their feedback. They're going to, read different articles or, give different insights, and then you publish that in a thought leadership, and then you take that thought leadership paper and create like a blog post. So this is just giving you an example and ideas of what you could do. And it is very common that, a CAB will have a working group focused on product development, roadmap reprioritization, different product enhancements. You want to dive deeper into different, new product releases. You want to get your CAB member feedback on it. So, and it's too in the weeds to go into in the CAB. So you take 3 or 4 sessions outside of the CAB. And then here in the middle, we have homework assignments and quotes, because, the CAB members are not your employees. So you're not making them do heavy, intense work. The heavy lifting really is on your side, but you are asking them to review any kind of documentation or review something you've put together, or it's a draft of that thought leadership, you put it together. So you're getting their feedback in that way. So we got a question here from Kelly. Why do you not recommend having CAB members nominate a substitute from their org if they can't attend?
Yeah.
So, go ahead, Rob.
All right, Tatiana, you and I agree on everything. Go ahead if you'd like.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a standard thing. We actually include that in our CAB charters that we help our customers put together, because this is like a select exclusive group of 12 to 15, customers, and you've set a specific persona, you have a specific role. So what tends to happen is once one person there, and maybe it's a busy executive, they can't make it, they just send one of their direct reports or someone else on their team, and that person is a different level of role, and they don't have the same responsibilities. They're not going to be able to participate and contribute to the discussions in the same way as the CAB member will. And then what happens once someone delegates their attendance, it's going to happen for other CAB members. You can't stop it. Once that, you can't stop it. Other CAB members are going to be busy, want to take other calls, and they're just going to start sending, different people on their team. Do you have anything else to add, Rob?
No, I completely agree. You just don't want to go down there. It sets a bad precedent. I also wrote a blog on this, guys. If you're getting that a lot, it might mean there might be some meaning behind it, some questions to ask, right? Do you have a strong program? Is it customer focused, right? It's just not a good idea to get started, right? It might have, once in a while you might get an exec, hey, I just can't make it. It's during their vacation or something comes up. Okay, we'll catch you next time, but just don't do the substitute. And you'll also send the meeting report afterwards, right? So it just starts your program downhill a little bit, like Tatiana said. Then others will start doing it.
Yeah, definitely.
Thanks, Kelly.
So I just wanted to give a quick example, 2 examples of working group deliverables. So on the left is a cybersecurity company, and their CAB was made up of chief information security officers. So the hot topic for them was insider threat. So what they did for this working group is they had a session at their actual CAB meeting on the topic. And of course, all of the CAB members said, we want to hear from our peers about how they're solving this. And so the company decided to create a working group to produce a thought leadership piece. So they had 3, I think maybe 4 sessions outside of the CAB. They gathered a group of a subset of those CAB members. They had 3 or 4 sessions with them going into each best practice and getting more feedback. And they produced a thought leadership piece, and which, is just helps drive awareness for the company, but also they want to hit their CAB members. The CISOs want to hear from each other. They want to share their thoughts. They want to see how others are solving for the same issues. So that was one example. The example on the right is a more in-depth example of a CAB working group. So this company provides software for financial crime screening. So their CAB was heads of AML, anti-money laundering. Those were heads of that AML at banks and financial institutions. And so they had a huge pain point where they, in this highly regulated industry, they had to answer to regulators regularly and meet with them. And they had to prove that the models they were using for the financial crime screening were valid. So that's what the title of this document is called, Model Validation Evidence Document. So these CAB members, this is a huge pain point. They said to the company, we need your help. We need you to provide us documentation that we can show to the regulators. So the company knew this is a very heavy lift, is a very intensive thing. And they met for about 9 different sessions throughout the year and produced a 60-page document, I believe it was, and it was a very intensive working group. And so they created the document and got feedback from the CAB members, which was great because they had heard this from other customers outside of the CAB, and the CAB was the impetus for them to actually produce it.
Hey, Tatiana. Yeah. Before we get to other key considerations, there's a good topic on the chat around customer attendees and, what if they're not showing up? A couple of thoughts there, guys. Claire and Megan. When you start your program, right, you have a charter, you're recruiting members. Hopefully you're about, hey, here's how often we're meeting. We're asking you to join for 2 years, right? So hopefully when they're agreeing to join your program, they understand how often you're going to be meeting, right? If it's a couple times a year, quarterly, whatever it is. And then you invite them and hopefully they remember, oh yeah, I agreed to participate. So that's kind of one part of it. If they're still not joining, meetings, or you can ask them if there's a reason why. Is it bad timing? Sometimes, right? If they're not joining, make sure that you're providing value. The meetings are good. If they've come to a couple of meetings and then they don't come anymore, maybe maybe there's some self-assessment there. Is meeting in person a challenge for your group, right? I sometimes have clients where getting people to meet in person is a challenge. Is virtual preferred, right? And how do you determine this? Survey your members, right? I'm seeing this more, to be honest, is before people would go to meetings and in person, and after people got used to doing things virtually and getting people to travel now can be more challenging. I'm seeing this a bit. So I would just say, remind people what they committed to. Make sure when you get them there, you're providing value, and do follow. And Megan had a good point. Hey, follow up with them. If you're not able to attend, hopefully they're at least responding to email. And maybe something came up, whatever. But if you're not hearing back, and then, okay, maybe you got really busy, sorry it didn't work out for you. Maybe we'll catch you another time, and, move them off the board and have, substitute somebody else. Hopefully that makes sense. Let's see. Stacy's been off topic, alleviate internal executive, inviting clients to be a part of the CAB without follow proper. Yeah. Believe it or not, stuff like this has happened for me. The old executives going rogue, right? When they just, hey, I invited this person. Hopefully you can mitigate that by communicating with your management. Hey, here's what we're doing. Here's the customers on the board. These are the customer advisory board, right? We're not accepting any, substitutes or anybody else. And here from our company is who's attending the meeting, right? I've had people crash the meeting for my own company, right? And then you have to be the bouncer and, bounce people. No, you can't come in. Start with communication, make sure that everyone understands this is what your plan is, this is what we're doing. And hopefully, Stacey, you have an executive sponsor who will, stick up for you guys and say, hey, no, you can't invite those customers. They're not a part of it. We're happy to take, suggestions for future customer advisory boards, and we'll evaluate them and get them in our pipeline. But yeah, just don't have them crash the meeting. I wrote a blog on this too. And then in our Q&A, there was a Q&A. Maybe we answered it. Okay, we talked about substitutes. Okay, keep the questions coming, guys. Oh, there's more lessons. Thanks, Rob. Yeah. Good. Okay. Other key considerations. I think I'm doing this one. But again, guys,
go
if you
ahead,
have
Rob.
questions, if you have additional questions, feel free to keep them coming. A few other notes around customer advisory boards, and that's the point. You have an account executive who wants to nominate someone. Keep in mind, recruitment never ends, right? As you keep your program going, you're going to have people that change jobs, change companies, they're acquired, their roles, they retire, they don't work out, right? So you're always on the lookout for new tab members. You have a pipeline, right? You have a certain number, right? It's always good to have more people than you need, right? You have an in-person meeting, ideal to have about a dozen people there, but that takes, getting 15 people to say they can make it, and some people can't, and there will be last minute things where people can't come. So we say you're always recruiting, because you always could use good quality members who meet your criteria and would be good for your program, right? Let's see. And see if there's any. I'm going to pause for questions. Good questions. Let's see. Q&A. Do you recommend refreshing members once a year or as needed? That's from Kathy. Kathy, I recommend when you start your program, you recruit members, you say, hey, please join for 2 years. Start with 2 years. And that gets them through a couple meetings, right? If they would like to continue, then they're welcome to continue, assuming that the customer wants to continue and you want to keep them. If you have members that are maybe not adding a lot of value, or you want to move on, or you have some other better members, you can, have them fulfill their initial, requirement. And then you can, say, hey, thank you for your service. You did a great job, blah, blah, blah. You can kind of, sunset their membership or move them to a customer advisory board, legacy committee, where they can still maybe get the meeting or something. But I wouldn't refresh members too much. Don't feel like you have to do it once a year. I have, one of my clients has had customer advisory board members serve for many years, and it works out great. We get to see how they develop, how they grow, they share information. So hopefully that makes sense, right?
Thanks, Rob. We've got 8 minutes, so
yeah. So 2 years if you meet
keep
quarterly.
going.
Tatiana mentioned that timeline. Again, that it's always a balance, guys, with your customers. You want to have them participate and not go too long between a meeting. The flip side is you don't want to, use them too much and get, wear them out and they start quitting because it's more than they bargained for, right? You'll have to kind of judge for that, how it works for you, right? I met a person once and I said, how often your customer advisory board does it meet? They said once a month. I was like, once a month, Jesus, and they don't mind your customers? It was really kind of a product, feature update thing, but yeah. Quarterly is good. Okay, I just mentioned this about retiring members, right? Have a tenure, if, have an alumni board where they can go if they've fulfilled their service and you kind of are, you want to replace them, you can do that way, right? Makes sense. Other things, communicating, promoting your board, guys, don't underestimate this, right? For yourselves, for your career. In fact, I just wrote an article that's coming up in CMS Wire about how to leverage, customer engagement to help your career. Is promote your CAB internally, right? Write a blog post, issue a press release, add a CAB page to your website. Somebody said that. When you, share on social media, communicate it to your executive management, right? Promote your board, and you're promoting yourself to position yourself for recognition and success for your board, right? So one of your board members renews or buys another product. Hey, that's revenue. That's net, incremental revenue that you drove, right? That'll help as you advance and grow your career. So promote your CAB, right? You're promoting yourself, really. Customer advocacy, be sure you use your customer advisory board for, success stories, case studies, videos, testimonials, quotes. You can do a press release about their successful implementation and the success they're seeing. Speaking engagements, right? At webinars, at trade shows, at your customer all hands, at your company all hands, right? Leverage your customer advisory board. They're going to be your best shot. They're your best customers. They're your most successful. They understand your company and they're most supportive. And they're most importantly, they're senior executives that when you say, hey, let's do a case study, you're not going to get referred to the lawyer. Oh, let's see if we're legally allowed to do that. And you'll never get it off the ground. But your customer advisory boards magically get things done at their company to get it approved, right? That's, the legal. I love the lawyers, right? I'm sure we're all big fans of how much they support our efforts, but I'm not bitter. Okay, measuring your board impact. I wrote about this so you can see this, but tracking new revenue opportunities. If you start with a member, you're starting a program, you measure their revenue before the program and then after, right? Track, do they renew? Do they expand? Do they buy your new products? Are they your beta customers? Right? If you're doing all these changes as your revenue, they might say, you guys need to, I was at a customer advisory board and they said, you guys just need to keep your support lines open longer. That was so easy. And the customers loved it and they stayed longer. It was so easy, right? What ideas were generated, new products, new markets, you can track their satisfaction. There's a lot of ways to measure the impact of your board. The more quantifiable and the more tied to finance and revenue, the better. Hope that makes sense. There's more resources, and that's a whole other webinar, by the way, that we could do. We do have some.
Rob, you wanted to talk. I just wanted to make a quick comment on this. This is just a slide showing specific examples of how different companies measure their CAB, and Adobe was at a recent CAB conference, and we'll send out the video to you. But you can see they have multiple CABs, and these are some of the items that they measure, including investment, the number of actionable ideas implemented, retention of their CAB members. And isn't that a great number to show 100% of CAB members on the CAB? And they have multiple CABs, and you can see here they also track internal satisfaction rate as well as external. And then Walter Kluwer's Health Solution, this is also from a CAB conference, they tracked product upselling and they compared the CAB, 64% of CAB accounts versus the non-CAB accounts. So that's a great measure, is to track your CAB, upselling this product enhancement versus the non-CAB accounts. And on the right is one of our clients, and you can see that they measure, and it's flat. You saw the prior slide had, 15, 20 things on it. You don't need to measure 20 things, but pick 3.
Sorry, Tatiana, hit the next slide.
Yeah. Oh yeah, can you go back?
Yeah, can I go back? Yes. Back.
So that third one, you can just see that, the deployment of the CAB program was part of their measures, the number of members, the acceptance rate. They do an NPS score, post-meeting, how did that change? And then they have impact on number of solutions accelerated or developed, and then they also do like a satisfaction score and tracking the increase. So you could do the satisfaction, check the satisfaction score prior to joining the CAB meeting, you have that data, and then after the CAB meeting, have them, fill out the survey, and you can track that as well. So we're in the
last... We're almost out of time.
Yeah.
We do have one question from Stephanie. She asked about multiple CABs. How do they divide themselves? If I don't recommend by product, that's or location or something else, that sometimes they can divide by industry, but I have seen that companies do it by product. And I just find that's very companies that are very self-focused rather than the market focused? That's kind of a short answer, Stephanie. If there's a better, longer answer that we kind of have more time for. But if you're thinking of starting multiple cabs, maybe it might be by region, right? Internationally or by industry. That's often, but I would ask a lot of questions if it's by product, right? Your customers aren't as into your product as much as you might think they are. That, again, a longer answer behind that, but I hope that kind of helps.
Yeah,
Tatiana, a couple minutes left for people who
Yeah,
might want to find some more resources.
Yeah, definitely. We have CAB resources on our website. You can visit us at igniteag.com/resources and our blog that Rob writes. And thanks so much for all of your feedback, Rob. And if you need help with managing, creating, or facilitating your advisory board, definitely contact us to speak to an Ignite CAB expert. So thank you, everyone, for joining. Last words, Rob.
Thanks, everyone. Yeah, great questions. Some of them, require a bit more length. But hey, give us a call. Drop us an email. My colleague Gavin, who's a super expert on customer advisory boards, can give you some really great advice and guidance on your specific program. So give him a call.
Thank you, everyone. Bye.
Thanks, everyone.